Hi, everyone. It's nice to be able to record this video for you. Some have requested some more help with the Adobe Animate product. And so I'll just go over some of the basic techniques that I'm hoping will help you all out. I wanted to go over a little bit more before starting that before doing anything in Animate, you should try to draw out what you're planning on animating. So whatever scientific topic that you're thinking about covering. And again, because this is only 15 seconds, no more than 15 seconds, it doesn't necessarily need to be something super complicated or full scientific process, just something along the lines of science so that way it gives you all a ballpark of what to talk about. So in my illustration, I'm just going to simply tell you all that the moon, similar to the sun, rises in the east and sets in the west. Obviously, mine will be a lot more rough or simplistic just to kind of get the basics out to you all. Your assignment will then take a little bit more effort with a little bit more time as well. And sorry, I know with the background, like this pocket in my hand is kind of disappearing with the green screen effect. So it's just kind of funny when you're just looking at stuff like that and recording, as you all will get to experience when you do your screencasts and everything for this coming week for module 6. But anyways, back to Adobe Animate. I will go ahead and share my screen and we're going to be going over some basics and I hope they help. So let's go ahead and share screen. So many of you should have already downloaded Adobe Animate already. And so you want to go ahead and create a new project. And once you create a new project, you're going to see different options. I'd like for you all to go with education because you are creating an educational animation experience. I mean, the other presets would have worked, but since there's already an education one, let's go with that. Your details, I would like for you all to go with medium. That way, some of you with varying bandwidths can still create a quality product, but not necessarily overload your bandwidth or computer. So let's go with the medium. Now, just so that you know, if you're working in industry or like at my job, for example, we would go with very high because we want to make sure we produce the highest quality of product for students or clients. That way, they could be on a large computer monitor and still see something of high quality, or you have something that could scale down and still also be good quality as well. So we are going to go with medium. And then also over here to the right, you'll see frame rate. And frame rate, the normal one is 24 seconds. So that is the typical frame rate for animation. That anything higher is not recommended for accessibility because people would then say it might induce seizures. Anything lower will be probably too slow. I mean, obviously, if you're going 23, 25, it's not like the end of the world, but on average, we do see a frame rate of 24. All right, so let's go ahead and click create. All right. Now, before we get started, I'd like to get you all into good practices. So let's go ahead and save this file. So we're going to go ahead and save as. Now, naming conventions are pretty important in our line of work as well. So for this case, obviously you want to do something for this class. So it's the Animate project, and you can underscore and do, for example, your last name. Mine would be such. Now, it doesn't have to be this file naming structure, but I do want you all to at least start thinking about that, especially when you go out into the field and you're thinking about digital assets and videos and everything. One good thing to talk to your employer about is how they want to name their files if you're working for them. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save. Okay, sounds good. All right, so some of you have seen different tutorials. So I'd like for you to get yourself oriented by going first to Animate, going to preferences and choosing the beginner preferences. Some of you may not have seen this when you first downloaded. So to make sure that the beginner preferences are on, I'm going to go ahead and show that again. Go to Animate, Preferences, excuse me, and click on Beginner Preferences. That way, the beginner preferences will give you more assets over here to your right. So over here to your right, you're going to see in the first option to your panel here, you'll see assets, and then you will see a variety of animated assets, static assets, and sound clips as well. And these are meant to help beginners using Animate. Now, also because I'm doing a screencast and I do want to make sure that I do as much as possible to practice what I preach, I will call myself out in that if I was doing this type of technology training for people, instead of just having a cursor moving around and telling you where to go, I would also like to have some for example, potential halo effect or color with my cursor so that it would be easier for you to see where I'm going. But I do want to get this video out to you sooner than later. And also I'm using Zoom to record instead of Camtasia. So that's why I'm not necessarily doing that for this video. But I do want to make sure I address it and let you know that that is an expectation when you do your screencasts for Module 6. All right, so now back to Adobe Animate. Now that we have our assets for the beginner preferences, okay, for you all, you're like, okay, great, Dr. Such, what do I do now? So again, to familiarize you with the interface, similar to GIMP and Photoshop, you have your canvas over here to the middle. You have your navigation, or excuse me, you have your panels over here to the right with some of your assets. Properties mean the characteristics of the object that you're looking at. Any kind of colors, alignment, library. And then down here, some of you have played around with this already. This is going to be pretty much kind of like our hotbed of what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is, now if you notice between the space between your canvas and this timeline, we're going to move it up so that way we have some more space and we can look at it some more. Because again, this is going to be the main area that you all will be manipulating. Okay, now the reason why, again, this is more important is, and why the timeline is so important is because unlike a regular Photoshop project, Illustrator project, you're animating. So your frames, your frame rate, your different layers are going to be your main thing. So looking at this timeline again is going to be very important. Now, similar to any of the Adobe products, which is their niche and which is why people flock to them and pay millions of dollars to billions probably to them, is over here to the left, they've made an interface and navigation that is pretty easy to and has multiple tools that you all can use to create things. And so this is very similar to many of their products. And if you saw GIMP, they tried to emulate this as well. So notice that anything you need to create will be more to the left. In general, you're going to be staying with your selection tool. That way you can move things around rather than necessarily manipulating them at this time. Again, I'm going over a very basic video. So we're just going to keep to the basic tools. So in general, just make sure that you're in the selection tool area. Probably the only other time that we would necessarily change anything at this point would be to use the text feature. But so by default, I would probably keep it at selection. So if anything goes wrong, just double check this area to make sure it's at selection. You also want to make sure your layers are down here. And here we go. Now notice that also this canvas that you want to make sure, right now I'm at 100, but if you wanted to zoom out a little bit more, you can go ahead to like 75%, even out a little bit more, you can do 50%, playing around with it, you can fit in window. So that way you have a nice comfortable size of seeing your canvas, and you can always zoom in if you needed to see things more in detail. All right, so now what I'm doing is trying to get you all to, for example, give an example, excuse me, of a animated topic. So again, I was telling you that my thought was to show you how the moon also rises in the east and sets in the west. And I wouldn't be ashamed of using any of these default things. So for example, if you want to talk about the macaw or the sun or something, totally feel free to use the assets as well that have been already shared with you in Animate. I'm choosing to go ahead and use static ones. So I've decided to go ahead and in my concepting and my storyboarding, I wanted to have a night scene. So I'm going to go ahead and move this mountain trail into a layer. Now notice when I added an asset, and whether you import it from something in your own documents or Google or whatever, and again, as long as you're using something for this class and not necessarily commercializing it, I'd like for you to reference it in your post so that way you're citing it. But I'm not asking you all to go and purchase $100 images, etc. So notice how when I drag the mountain trail here, it moved and then put it into this canvas. Notice how it became a layer down here. All right, so you want to make sure that you have a layer for each of the objects that you're going to be dragging in. So right now I have a mountain layer. And then I was looking at the assets some more. So maybe as you're storyboarding, you want to see what you have to then determine what your story is going to be, what your lesson's going to be. So I noticed that they had a couple of things I was interested in, which was the mountain trail and the moon and stars. So I'm going to go ahead and move the moon and stars into my scene as well, and look how it created a second layer. So that's the nice thing about using the assets as well, because it automatically creates these different layers. If you needed to create a different layer, notice this plus sign will go ahead and create a different layer for you if you needed it. I'm going to go ahead and delete that for now because I don't need another layer at the moment. But notice that's how you would create another layer. Okay, now if I wanted to, for example, manipulate the mountain some more, or the moon and the stars some more, I can double click, excuse me, actually, let me, whoops, cancel that. I would, hold on. You could even click on view only active layer. That way you're just looking at the mountain and trail, or if you want to view all layers, that's a nice one too. Also, if you wanted, again, to manipulate any of that, you can actually click into it. Hold on, I'm trying to do this for you all so that you can see, you can actually manipulate the sky and the mountains, etc. Let me see if I can get this. There you go. So when you click on, for example, this icon here to see the layer properties, cancel, you can see how the different lines to that image can also be manipulated as well. So I'm going to get out of this view, bring me back to the regular, and then we can start doing the animations, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, again, I don't want to confuse anyone there by being like, oh my gosh, what was all that? But if you do want to know how to manipulate the layers into more detail, practice clicking around in this area. And then that way you'll be able to do anything else you want to a specific layer. Now notice right now, each of these things are at one frame, and one frame is so fast. So you're not even going to see any movement. Everything is static right now. So the key thing to know is this going to be this area. You're going to have your insert keyframe, insert blank keyframe, insert frame. Now these three are going to be very important, as well as this blue line or blue drag. Usually this for a video would show like how fast your thing or how fast your video is moving, but this actually helps to tell Animate where you want things to start. So right now we're starting here. We have a start with insert keyframe. Now a keyframe is important because it tells Animate when you want something to start with an animation. And then also by inserting frame here, we say that we want this scene to continue. Now we can do this and, for example, keep inserting frames, but it becomes a little tedious. So what you want to do is just make sure whether you're using a PC or a Mac, and as you can see, I'm using a Mac. I'm going to select both my layers. And notice that when I do and go to the end where this vertical black line is, and I hold on to that, I can actually drag it to, let's say, 2 seconds. And notice that it creates all these keyframes for me from the beginning to 2 seconds. Now to see whether or not it moves, for example, let's again, remember how this blue line is kind of very important to show where we are in our animation process. If you ever want to see how your project animates, use the play button down here. So play, here we go. So there you go. Great. Everything's moving, but you're like, okay, Dr. Such, that was great, but I don't see anything moving. So this is where that fun begins. So I want the mountain trail to stay the same. I don't want anything to move in my story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock it down so I don't accidentally move it around. I'm still going to show it. So that's why I'm not going to hide it with this eye here. But I will go ahead and move my blue bar back, and instead of highlighting or excuse me, selecting the mountain trail, I'm gonna go ahead and select my moon and stars. Now, as you saw in some of your videos, it might have been confusing. You're like, okay, well, how do I do this animation now? So before you start any animation, you want to identify the layer or the object that you want to manipulate, to animate. And in this case, I would say, let's go ahead and you're going to need to do classic twinning. So, or tweening, excuse me. So in order to do that, there's multiple ways of accessing things. But once you determine the thing that you want to animate, click on that layer. For me, I'm on a Mac, so I'm using Control, Select, and I create classic tween, or you can go up to the features here and go to insert and create classic tween. Now, the reason why tween is so important is because it basically allows you, it tells Animate that from the time that you've chosen, in this case, we want 2 seconds, I want the object that I've chosen to move in these 2 seconds. And by allowing tween, I'm telling it that I'm going to be creating a pathway. So again, remember how important this blue bar is. You're going to move the moon. I want the moon to start off over here to the left. Let's even have it start off screen. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and maybe by 1 second, by the middle of my time, I want the moon to have risen to the very top, the middle top of my canvas by that time. And now notice that by tweening it, it's going to naturally move my moon from the left to the top of the middle of the image. Now, to make sure that happened, see, look, I'm dragging my blue bar back, and look, you're seeing that the moon is going from where I moved it to back to its original position. And if you hit this play button again, you'll see, hey, look, it moved there. Now notice, because of the asset that I chose, that the stars kind of move with it, with more time and effort and etc., I would probably have another layer where I just have stars. So that way you don't have those stars moving with your moon if you didn't want that to happen. All right, now I want it to set. So then as part of my tweening, notice that again, these little tiny dots show that I have activated tween for this whole 2 second period. So now that the blue line is over here at the end, I want to move my moon down so that it shows that it's setting. Okay, so let's go from the beginning. See, now move down. Okay, let's go ahead here. There we go. Now notice that it kind of is triangular. It's kind of rough. It's kind of rigid. It's almost like the moon bounced up to the top, then bounced to the bottom. Now, with some more time and finesse, I probably would have more like add more placements of the moon along the way. That way there's more of an arch versus a triangular thing. So for example, um, let's go ahead and give a little example here. If I move my blue back here, instead of, pinging from up here, I might have, like, for example, moving the moon a little bit up so that the angle to get to that top section isn't totally as harsh or very rigid. So see, notice that by adding that little extra step right there, it made the arch a little smoother. So that's how you can play around with the animation of that narrative of that moon right there. And now to make that kind of science lesson, I'm going to add a different layer. Now, some of you have chosen to do audio. In this case, since I'm talking to you, I'm going to go ahead and create a text instead as a lesson to people. So I'm going to go ahead and say text. I'm going to call this my text. And as I was talking about earlier, instead of keeping it on the select tool, I'm going to come over here to the left and choose my text tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and start creating a text box and start typing and saying the moon also rises in the east and sets in the west as, for example, a lesson to my students. Now notice that I already chose this nice aqua color to contrast with my blue. And so when I was, oh, excuse me, now notice this is actually a good lesson. So the text tool allowed me to type, but now that I'm trying to move it, it's like, oh, why is it not moving to where I want to be? I want to move it more to the right corner. So you want to go back to your select tool, and that's where you can manipulate, move your objects. So here I'm moving it down a little bit more so that the mountains are the background and that it provides the contrast. When I was grading some of your other assignments, you all did well with the technical, but to kind of elevate the design, for contrast, you want to make sure that there's always a nice difference in a lighter and darker color, especially with text. So your students have an easier, or your clients have an easier time reading the text, and they don't have to strain or have issues in that way with reading. So now let's go ahead and see what this experience is like. We make sure that the blue is back here. We're back on the selection tool. Let's go ahead and press play. All right, there we go. Now notice how we just have that nice animated scene with this little lesson to the students. And of course, we can then begin other scenes to then the moon also rises in the east and sets in the west, etc. So let's go ahead and add maybe some music. So it's kind of quiet, but maybe you want to add a little effect of some music to, just be that more elevated with the experience for students. So over here to the right, we have some sound clips. And again, we want this music to be the whole thing. So let's drag the blue back to the beginning. Let's see, let's go with, that's rain, and we don't see any rain, so let's not go with that one. The beach, also not in the scene. So this is the fun part. I like playing with audio, so we'll look at different ones here. Okay, so this one has more of a wind sound, which might be something that we would see in the scene. So let's go ahead and move this audio clip into the scene. And for right now, because everything is the same, it doesn't matter which layer you attach it to. But because the most stable layer is the mountain trail, I'm going to go ahead and choose that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and move the audio in here. And notice, great, the weather ambient sound became a different layer. And then also notice the orange line here tells you that that's the audio. And notice when the lines become thicker, let me see if I can make these lines larger for you. Okay, at this time, I'm just going to keep it here, not finagle with it to get distracting. But notice the thicker lines in the middle means that the audio is getting louder. So the thinner an audio line is that the quieter it is. Whereas when it becomes thicker like that and the range becomes wider, it means that it's getting louder. And when there's peaks, it means that there's some audio spikes. So now let's go ahead and start our learning experience again. And here we are. So that becomes that lesson of the moon also rises in the east and sets in the west. So I hope that little tutorial helps. Now let's say you wanted to switch it up. So now, okay, now that you've gone over here, it's been 2 seconds, and you then want to showcase how the sun also rises in the east and sets in the west. What you would then do is, for example, let's go ahead and go to another static. And I think there was a sun in here as well. Oh, here we go, in the animated one. So what we would do is move this. Now notice that we want this to start in the next scene. So we want to move our blue line over here. We want to move the sun onto our canvas. Okay, now notice that right now the sun is totally part of our scene. So what we want to do is move this shine scene. Excuse me. Let me go ahead and add another frame. So you always, instead of just dragging from the keyframe, you want to insert a frame as well. So that way it gives like another step for your sun scene. And then you want to move this one back, excuse me, sorry. Drag your keyframe. For some reason it escalated my sun line to 4 seconds. I'm going to bring back the keyframe to 2 seconds. And now notice now my sun comes up. Okay, so now remember how a keyframe tells Animate that you're starting some animation. So your keyframe is now going to be here at 2 seconds. And so let's go ahead and see what that experience is going to be like. Let's drag back to the beginning, play, experience done, sun moves in. Now it's a little choppy in that you're going directly from the sun into the, excuse me, the moon into the sun. What you can always do here is, for example, add some keyframes where maybe there's a transition to black or something to kind of give a pause, or you can do some kind of motion to, for example, what I could have done is, let's say, we could, I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we could tween the sun, and this goes back to that storyboarding idea again. In this case, I only, to be honest, only storyboarded out in my mind and also in practice, this moon from the east to the west. But if I was storyboarding it out, I have some more, I might also animate this between scenes where it kind of goes off while the sun kind of comes on. So that way there is some more movement and transition there as well. But if we left it as is, you would be able to go from this scene immediately to this scene. Animate, I'll be honest, is a little bit more friendly to animating things, but with scenes, you'll have to play around with it, whether it be in transitions. That's where video editing comes in, but you can then go into either a scene like what we just did, And also you might want to play around with editing different scenes, but I'll go ahead and do this for now because I think even if you all just stayed in one scene and played with tweening and different objects and audio, that would probably be just enough for this project as well. So I really hope this helps. I really hope it calms some nerves. One final thing I think people have had issues with is how do I finish this assignment? So basically go ahead and save this assignment first to your computers. And if you want to test your movie, there's this play button to the top right where it basically will flatten everything, bring you to your web browser and basically showcase what your quote unquote movie is going to be like with the animation. Now notice my moon is kind of moving pretty fast like this. What we could have also done is, for example, instead of having it at 2 seconds, I could have dragged it out to like 3, 4, and then made that type of experience so that the whole thing is about 3, 4 seconds instead of just 2. Now to export, you can do social share or publish. You can go to publish and create an MP4. And your videos are going to be so short that you can then go ahead and share your MP4 in the discussion in class. I'm excited that you can also use Animate to create animated GIFs because that's a lot of fun nowadays. So there's that, or you can use social share and go to your YouTube account and then share your YouTube link. Okay, so I really again hope that helps to get you from beginning to end with this project and that this gives you again some more experience. If you have any questions, let me know. All right, take care everyone. Bye.